The intersection of endurance sport, health, fitness, and life. Challenging conventional ideas and empowering people with the science of self-propelled motion. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast, hosted by Tony Rich.
I had seen 6 times that I didn't know how to pace this race. He had won the race 6 times coming into it. He clearly knew how to pace it.
I liked to dictate the race. I liked to mentally feel as though I was in charge of the race. And if Mark wanted to sit behind me, so be it.
So in '89, I stayed with him the entire way on the swim. I stayed with him on the bike ride. I shadowed him the whole way. I thought, you know what? You're on such a fine line that an inch lost or a second lost can be a race lost.
But it's going to come down to the marathon. And I just thought, well, I'll just do these little surges and it'll be fine.
He was setting a pace that was absolutely blistering. The miles just kept going, and it was clear that neither of us was able to do anything to break the other one. And so it was just going to be a foot race, and I didn't know how long that foot race was going to last. There was like this silence. The only sound that was happening was our feet hitting the ground.
We were both feeling the wear and tear. I looked at the 24-mile mark on the side, looked up at the top of Palani Hill, and said, it's coming up. I'm going to make my move. And right at that moment, Mark made his move.
Something just said, go. And it was like I was shot out of a cannon. I started to sprint, as best as you can sprint at the end of an Ironman. I looked back, I couldn't see him. I stopped and I go, yes, I knew it. I knew at that point it was over with. I would have never had that race had I not been side by side with Dave Scott. He taught me so much that year about pacing and how to race it and how to stay confident in the midst of impossible moments.
Mark Allen and I came along at an unusual time in history, early history of the sport, and we collided at all these races in the 80s, and then in 89 we had this epic duel. And I thought, well, maybe we'll meet again, and it never happened.
There has never been another race that has come close to matching what the two of us did together out there, and how each of us propelled the other one to such an incredible performance.
Hello, I am back with Season 6 of the Endurance Experience Podcast. And what a guest I have to start off Season 6. None other than the legend himself, 6-time winner of the Ironman World Championship, 5 consecutive victories in Kona, Hawaii. He was named ESPN's greatest endurance athlete of all time, Mark Allen. Over the course of his racing career, which ended in 1996, he maintained a 90% average in top 3 finishes. He was named Triathlete of the Year 6 times by Triathlete magazine, and in 1997, Outside magazine dubbed him the world's fittest man. He was inducted into the Ironman Triathlon Hall of Fame in 1997. He's also been inducted into the USAT Hall of Fame and the ITU Hall of Fame. We had a great conversation. We talk about the battle, the Iron War in 1989 with Dave Scott, a famous legend that is told by many triathletes and endurance enthusiasts. And we talk a little bit about that, and I asked Mark, are there any lessons or mantras that he can impart onto athletes to take away from that legendary performance? I also talked with him about the pro field today and how the times in the Ironman triathlon keep dropping within, say, the last decade. Mark's record held, the course record held for quite a long time. Over the past few years, it's been beaten or surpassed, I should say. And so I get his take on training technologies, innovations, etc. What is the reason for this outperformance? He also gave me some of his thoughts on the shift to the new Nice, France course for the Ironman World Championship, which is a much harder course. And he actually raced on the Nice course 10 times and won it 10 times. He was undefeated on the Nice course. So he gives his thoughts on how the athletes might fare with a much more difficult course than Kona. We also talk about training and for athletes on the spectrum from recreational to high performance. What are some of the things that he focuses on in the training cycle for athletes? And so for all your endurance enthusiasts, you'll be able to get some pretty good advice from Mark Allen. So I wouldn't want to miss that. We also talk about nutrition, not only daily nutrition protocol, but that critical period before an Ironman event or an endurance event or the day of the endurance event. And we talk about in-race fueling as well. What are some best practices and recommendations? And then Mark tells us about some of the things he's doing now with his coaching business and his coaching endeavors. And I ask him about the march of AI or artificial intelligence and how he's preparing for the next generation of AI and whether or not AI would eventually completely eliminate the need for a flesh and blood coach. So we had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. What a way to start off season 6. So without further delay, I give you Mark Allen. All right, I am on with Mark Allen. Thanks for coming on to the Endurance Experience podcast.
Hey, great to be here. You called me a legend, but you are a legend. Let me tell you.
Oh, you mean you probably looked at indoor Ironman, but believe me, it's not that impressive.
I was thinking I should have Googled myself and see if I'm in the Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know what for, but you never know.
This is a great pleasure for me to talk to you, Mark. So I want to talk about Iron War, which we're coming up on the 35th anniversary of. And I want to talk about, Ironman pro times, Ironman professional times are seemingly dropping. I want to talk to you, your thoughts on why that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about some nutrition and training. A lot of endurance athletes listen to this podcast, and so I definitely have to get some of your best practices for sure. And I want to talk about Mark Allen coaching, which is your business and how you help athletes, coaches, and people. So let's start with the Iron War. So I read Mark Fitzgerald's book here, Iron War, and on the famous duel between you and your rival, Dave Scott, and we're coming up on the 35th anniversary of this. And people, whether they're older athletes or even the younger athletes, they all know about this story, this legend of the Iron War. And I'm hoping you might be able to reflect on that, your career, and whether or not you feel like there are any high-level mantras or lessons that come from just your career in that duel. Many people may not be aware that it took a while for you to get to the level to be able to beat Dave. I think you came in second a couple times and third another time. So are there any high level mantras or lessons that you can impart on athletes?
Yeah, great question, Tony. I think anybody who does endurance sports, if you don't end up learning some lessons that help you in life, or come up with mantras or ways of managing difficult situations, you've missed the real gold and the real richness that sport can bring you. If a race is just about a time or a place, you kind of forget about those things. Like when I reflect back on my career, I don't think, gee, I went 809 whatever, in that Iron War race in 1989 against Dave. I think more about the experience that I went through during that day, marching side by side with the best guy in the world at the time. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, for those who don't know, my first win at the Ironman World Championship, 1989 in Kona, it didn't happen overnight. Like, great successes don't happen at the speed of Twitter. It takes time to really develop. And it took me a long time to figure out kind of what was the formula that was going to unleash that great race that I had envisioned that I could have, but wasn't getting. 6 years prior to that, I had competed in Kona. I got second a couple times. I got third once. I got fifth a couple times. The very first year that I did it, I was actually with Dave Scott in the lead of the bike, but about halfway through the bike ride, my derailleur snapped. And so I had to drop out. So I had 6 years of kind of these points where, like, I could be in the lead at the end of the bike. I could be in the lead halfway through the run. I could be in the lead even with just a few miles to go in the marathon, but I couldn't hold it all the way. And I thought, am I cursed? Do I just not have what it's going to take? Sometimes those big dreams we have, they are not going to happen. That doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing, but because you always learn something that will help you out, that can maybe even transform who you are as a person in those tough journeys. But after 6 times of trying to win and not winning, I thought, maybe I'm not cut out for this race. I was able to beat Dave at pretty much any other race that I came up against him around the world. I was able to win everywhere else, but not at the Ironman in Hawaii. And so at the beginning of 1989, I was actually thinking, I'm not going back to Kona. There's something that's just not there for me. Maybe the race is too long, it's too hot, something with a big island. I don't know, but I'm just not going to go there. Mm-hmm. But after, I started training in January, like most people, try to get back in the rhythm. And a couple of weeks into training, I could just feel this. You have to come back. You have to come back. The island was calling, and those callings should never be ignored. There's probably turning points in your life or people who are listening in their lives where something was calling you and you were resisting it, but you knew you couldn't turn your back on it. And so I knew I had to go back for a 7th try, but I also knew that I needed to go there in a very different way. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to get more of what you already had. And, those races were not satisfying. And so I really stopped and I reflected and asked myself, what is my real purpose in going there? What do I really want to get out of this experience? And I thought it would be great if I could win. You get second place, there's only one spot left for you, right? But clearly, if you don't win, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means that maybe the purpose was wrong. Mm-hmm. So in 1989, I thought my real goal this year is to go there and have a really solid swim, bike, and run, to push the pace. Don't go easy, but push it, but don't go too hard. And I had never found that middle ground. Like, there were some years where I kind of held back a little bit, and I ran all the way through the marathon. And there were other years where I pushed too hard too early, and then I ended up walking on the marathon. And if you walk on the marathon at the Ironman World Championship, you are not going to be the champion. Somebody's going to pass you, right? So anyway, that was my goal. And so I guess that would be one sort of high level thing that I learned is that the purpose of why you're doing something is so important. And if the purpose that you have been doing something isn't getting you what you want, maybe the purpose is wrong. And I realized trying to win is great, but having my best race is what's really important. And so when I went back there in 1989, I had this just sense of calm and feeling relaxed that I'd never had before, because I didn't have that pressure on myself, like, oh, I've got to win or else the day's a failure. I could finish second, fifth, 10th, 20th, 50th. I didn't care. I just wanted to have that great race. And so that really transformed my whole experience there. Like before the swim start, I was actually looking around and I was like, wow, this water really is blue and beautiful. And look at the sun coming up over the volcano over there. Things that I hadn't noticed before, and so the whole experience was something I'd never felt. And I also really kind of had a talk with the island, because it's a very intense environment, and when we throw ourselves in intense environments, whether it's physically intense or maybe intellectually intense or emotionally intense, if we try to push that away, it's not going to work. You can't, there's some things you can't avoid. I needed to feel at peace on the Big Island with this intensity of the rawness, the lava, the wind, the heat, the humidity.
Right.
And I just went to this place along the ocean before the race, and I said, hey, Big Island, let me just be here as me. And that was also kind of a high level thing. Like, we have our idols, the people that we look at and go, wow, if I could do what they do, that would be amazing. And a lot of times we think, let me do what they do by trying to be them. And
Right.
so all those years prior, I had been looking at Dave Scott and thinking, he's winning. He's breaking world records every time he goes out there, pretty much. I need to be like him if I'm going to win. And Dave has his way of racing is he likes to control the race. He likes to be up front. He likes to dictate what goes on. He likes to control the entire day and the whole field, right? And when he got off the plane in Kona, you could just see it. The guy was like a superhero. It looked like he got pumped up to like 200 PSI. The dude was like this, rah, And so I thought, okay, when I go to Kona, I got to be like, invincible, and nobody can touch me, and I am unbreakable. And then I realized that's not how I race best. I looked at all of my great races that I'd had in other places like Nice, France, and in Australia and different areas. And I, of course, I had my strategies of how I wanted to try to approach the day to have my best race. But the main thing that I did in every race where I had great performances was I just said, let me just see how the day unfolds and let me figure out how to pull the best out of me based on what's going on this day.
Right.
Because you ultimately can't predict how it's going to happen. You just got to figure it out on the day. And so when I went there and had that little talk with the island, I said, let me just be here the way I am. Let me not have to be Dave Scott. Let me be Mark Allen.
Right.
And, I have a book called The Art of Competition. And one of the quotes in there is, it's very difficult to beat someone at their game. It's very easy to win when it's your game. And that's how I needed to play that day. I needed to race as me and to surrender and to sort of go, let me see how it unfolds with such a different mindset. And so that's another high level thing that is like, sometimes we just have to figure it out on the day. We can't, when you have the dynamic of other athletes, of weather, of things that can go wrong, you can't predict what you're going to have to deal with and how you're going to make it past those tough moments.
Right.
And the third thing that really stood out on that day was I saw how important the thoughts were that were going on in my head. So, at some points I felt pretty strong and confident, and there were other points where I felt like I was losing it. That internal chatter started going, and all that negative talk was taking place, and Dave Scott, he's so strong, he's going to win. I don't know if I can do it. My legs are killing me. It's hot. It's windy. I should have done different training. And at one point I just go, shut up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And those two simple words, shut up.
Yeah. You always think about, oh, maybe I should have did a little bit more, or maybe I should have did that last big ride, or maybe I should have did this. But it sounds like you were calm, you were at peace. And when you go in shape and you're calm and at peace and you have nothing to lose, sometimes really good things happen, as they did on that day.
Yeah, there's nothing that can be broken when you go in with those things that you just mentioned. And that's what that day was for me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So if people have just want more background about that race, I would highly recommend going to YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube chronicles of the Iron War, so go check it out. I might put one in the show notes.
Yeah, so, if you want a really good read on that, Dave Scott and I put together a 10-part blog series about the whole year leading up to the race, and you can find it. You can find it at 1989thestory.com.
Nice. And I'll put the link in the show notes so people can grab it.
Yeah, and it's because neither of us had a perfect year leading up to it. We each had our own challenges, and it ended up culminating on that one day. But it was my business partner Scott Zagarino said, "Why don't you guys tell the real story of all the stuff that went into it?" Because he goes, "I know both of you, and I know that there's a lot that neither of you have talked about publicly." And so that was really cool because I actually got to hear from Dave what he was going through that year, and
from his point, from his side,
point of view, and he got to see what I was going through. And anyway, it's a really good read to have the two of us sort of just sharing our journey that whole year.
I'll have to. I don't know if I ever saw it. I'll have to check it out. Or maybe when the 35th anniversary, maybe you two should get together, just you two again, and go at it.
Yeah, I think it would be very disappointing, Better to leave the legend as it is.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the pro field and the Ironman now. When we look back at the times, Patrick Lang, Jan Frodeno, and even over the last couple of years, the times of the Ironman, the records just keep going down. And I'm interested in what you think is behind that. Is it course changes? Is it technology? Is it innovation? I mean, your record stood for quite a long time before they were beaten, but all of a sudden it just, over the last, I would say within the last decade, we started to see men's and women's times drop. So what do you think is behind it?
Yeah, another great question, Tony. For many years after I stopped, the world record dropped a little bit, but it was very incremental. There weren't any dramatic big jumps in the time. And a lot of the winning times were actually slower than I went for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, like you said, kind of starting around that when Patrick Lange broke my marathon run split, things really started to change. Part of it, obviously, is bike technology. Just the aerodynamics and basically all the pros now are going into wind tunnels and getting wind tunnel tested and really optimizing their position on the bike. That's one thing. Second thing is just a lot of the metrics that people can look at and sort of just fine tune their training a little bit more each day. Those little fine tuning things that, power meters and everything that people have now adds up to a lot on race day. Obviously now, most recently, two other things. One, the super shoes.
Yes.
Somebody sent me a pair of the Nike ones about a year ago, and I put them on. And I'm like, this is a breakthrough. Like, these shoes are unbelievable. And if I wish I'd had these, because my marathon time would have been so much faster. So that's another piece. But I think the final piece that's really afforded the athletes the ability to go as fast as they are now are the improvements on race nutrition. Like when I was competing, the products that we had were kind of in the dark ages compared to what the athletes can consume now. And so for me to get in 350 calories an hour was about the most I could get in. I heard recently that Christian Blumenfeld, when he won the 2021 Ironman World Championship in St. George, that he was getting in between 500 and 600 calories an hour. And so the speed that we go in an Ironman is not limited for me, it was not limited by my fitness. It was limited by my ability to keep the engine full of gas.
Right.
Basically, I could have gone faster, but then I would have run out of fuel. And so now, with the products that they have access to, they can just absorb more calories per hour than I was able to. And that makes a huge difference.
What did you use in '89? I mean, Gatorade wasn't out until, I can't remember, but
they had Gatorade, but it didn't work for me in race. I use it a lot in training, but it didn't work in races. On the bike, I had something that was kind of like Ensure, sort of almost like a meal replacement. And then once that started to kind of run its course, I mean, like, you get that taste fatigue and all of a sudden it tastes like blah. Then I would switch to some gels. And then then on the marathon, I took Coke, defizz Coke, because at that point I needed stuff to get in there as quickly as it could. And I knew that I could last about 3 hours with Coke. And so I would have Coke, a couple gels, and I also had, some salt tablets with me to keep the sodium up. And that's what I had.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned it. Sure. That's one of the things that I used for many years. I would go to CVS and get Ensure Plus. It's made for older people to get in calories. And the bikes. So you had steel bikes in '80s, were they steel, no clipping pedals?
Well, my very first bike was a road bike with toe straps, and obviously nothing aero. And some of the first races that I was in, I didn't even wear a helmet. You didn't need to wear, there was no regulations on helmet. Pretty stupid, right? But anyway, by the time I did my final Ironman in 1995, I actually had I had tried a couple carbon fiber bikes that were the very first ones made, and they were very, very heavy. They didn't have the design quality that they have now. And the bike final Ironman bike that I had was actually made of aluminum, and it had some aero tubing, and so it was kind of like the very beginning of the aero revolution. We started using aero bars in, I think it was 1988 or something like that. I think I started in 1988. But as far as bikes, it was right around the mid 90s that the aerodynamics started to come into it.
Wow.
And that went through a lot of changes. And if you look at my position on the bike compared to the position now, I look like a complete amateur, but back then my position was as good as anybody knew how to get it. So there's just been that progression of knowledge, and so it does make a difference. And so, if you spend 15 minutes less or 20 minutes less on the bike, you have so much more energy left over for the marathon, which is also a thing that adds into, these dramatic jumps in fitness or in performance.
Yeah. So some of it's the bikes, some of it's the clipless pedals and aero helmets and aero position, but nutrition above all, you think, and then certainly a lot of the wearable technology and the technologies that we have now, indoor training, power meter technology, all of it is added up. So now routinely, a lot of the pros are doing sub 8 hours. on pretty tough courses. How do you think the Nice course? You mentioned Nice. Do you think that the recent change is going to be a big change with some of the pro athletes now? That's a tougher course, yes.
Oh yeah, I think it's got over 7,000 feet of climbing, something like that. So it's a very challenging bike course with that amount of climbing. You have to be good at bike handling because you have descents. What goes up must come down.
Right.
So it'll be a completely different challenge and probably a different skill set that will win the race, the Ironman World Championship in Nice. This year it's the men. Next year they'll swap. The men will be in Kona and the women will be in Nice. The times will I don't think will be as fast as they were in Kona last year.
Yeah.
And also Kona, they haven't had a bad weather year in many years now. And at some point they're going to have one of the classic howling wind and no cloud cover and baking hot. And last year was about as perfect as I've ever seen, like barely a breath of wind and some cloud cover. And, Gustav Eden just blew away the world's record. So, but anyway, I think as far as the top people, Nice is actually pretty exciting because it will give some athletes a better opportunity to have a great race who just aren't good in Kona. I mean, let's face it, to win in Hawaii, you have to be good in the heat and the humidity and just be able to kind of just drone away. That's a very different kind of skill set and fitness than you need to do really well on a course where you're doing a lot of climbing. I personally love that combination of a very hilly bike and then just this dead flat fast run. For me, that was like the ultimate combination.
Why so?
I think because one, I'm pretty good climber, on the bike. So I'm much better at climbing than I am at just at kind of like rolling up and down. That requires more like raw strength. That suits kind of a almost stockier type rider. But climbing, I'm a little bit lighter. My weight to strength ratio is a little bit better. So I'm really good on those just long, steady climbs. And then on the run, because it was flat, if you could generate speed over those longer distances, you had a huge advantage. And I was able to do that. I can push up toward my sort of lactate threshold for longer than most guys. And so Nice suited me perfectly. I raced the triathlon there 10 times and I won it 10 times. So that's the perfect 10,
course.
A 10 pack. So I'm super excited and pumped to be in. I'll be going to Nice this year and working with Ironman, and it'll be exciting to see who actually excels on that course.
Yeah. I'll be watching for sure. All right, let's talk some training. And like I said, many endurance enthusiasts listen to this podcast. So if we talk to Mark Allen, we got to get some training in here. So do you have, let's say you're coaching athletes, and obviously recognizing that there are many athletes that fall on the spectrum from recreational to high performance. So just considering the sort of middle group, that median group who go out and trains for 70.3s and Ironman races. Do you have any mantras, aerobic versus threshold, cycling focus, run focus, low tech versus high tech? I mean, do you have any mantras, or if you're coaching that type of athlete, what type of high level strategic approaches do you employ with those athletes as far as training goes?
Yeah, one of the key mantras I try to impart on the athletes that I coach, which I do on a platform called Triathlete, is consistency. Consistency is the absolute key to improving your fitness and performance. So, what ideally you want to kind of do is to look for a long-term approach to training and how you train. So you want to just sort of almost coax your body into getting in shape, so little
Right.
by little. And that requires patience, because you'll go through periods where it looks like, if you're training consistently, it looks like nothing's happening. And all of a sudden, one day to the next, you'll go up to the next level. And a lot of athletes, they want to see that progress all the time. And so they end up pushing themselves to get those improvements. But what they're actually doing is taxing their body to a point where at some point the body can't keep up. And then they have to cut way back. They get injured, they get sick, they get burned out.
Right.
And if you are injured, sick, burned out, and it's harder to get motivated, you don't go out and do the stuff anymore, you're not consistent. And so what kind of how that pans out as far as aerobic, anaerobic, the engine that we all use for endurance athletics is that fat burning aerobic engine. So that's, a lot of sort of that zone 2 work where
Yep.
you go out and you train at a steady pace. You come home, you don't feel completely trashed. You actually probably feel better when you get back than when you started. Very different than when you do a super hard workout, swimming, cycling, or running, excuse me, where you're really pushing that anaerobic threshold. You come home, you're wasted, and you feel like, I did a great workout. And yes, those are important to do because they help elevate VO2 max, which means you get more oxygen in quicker when you do that high-end work. But it's also an adrenal stress. You activate your adrenal system, which is that fight or flight. It's that panic mode inside your body that releases all the carbohydrates and uses those for fuel. But you do those sparingly. That should be just a small part of your total regimen. So again, the
5%,
core,
10%, 15%, any number you would throw on it just
no, it depends. It depends on the athlete.
Yeah.
If you're a younger athlete, you can gain a lot of benefit over a long period of time with a lot of anaerobic work. But as you age, the amount of weeks in a row that your body can manage anaerobic work becomes less and less. But you gain a lot more benefit out of the aerobic work you do as you get older. So, young folks, they can get away with a lot more anaerobic work and get benefit out of it. Older folks definitely need to focus on the aerobic, but they still need to do that anaerobic, because anaerobic hard work as you get older gives you big changes in your mitochondria, those little things in every cell that helps generate ATP for muscle contraction and all that. The side note of that is, along with that aerobic work, low to moderate heart rate work, it's also important to do strength training.
Right.
And especially as you age, that strength work that you do, functional strength or in a gym, however you do it, so you're actually doing true strength work for the muscle. That's so key for maintaining that lean muscle mass. I I didn't really get this in the first part of my career. I never did strength training, and right about the time I was around 33, 34, I could see that it didn't matter how much I swam, biked, or ran. I was starting to not have the same resiliency. I didn't have the same strength on climbs. I wasn't recovering as quickly. My speed was dropping. I was like, okay, I get it. I need to do strength work. And so
Right.
I actually lived a couple blocks from a Gold's gym, like where all the big dudes are. And so I would walk into this place and I'd stand there in shock. Like, I'd look at these massive guys like throwing these huge weights around, and then I looked at me, a triathlete, this little scrawny dude, and I was totally intimidated. I mean, here I am, Ironman champ Mark Allen, totally intimidated to go into the weight room because I had no idea what to do. I knew what a curl was, but it's like beyond that. So anyway, the short version of it is I knew I needed help. And so I got the help of a great woman, Diane Bukta, who was she was an encyclopedia of strength training, and she led me through several years, just every strength session, cycling through different kinds of phases and developing that strength that I had lost. And the first full season that I incorporated strength training into my swim, bike, and run workouts, it was the best year that I had ever. And so I'm 65 now, and if there's one workout, one type of workout every week that I never neglect, it's the strength training.
Yeah. 1 or 2 sessions per week.
Yeah, twice a week.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Yeah. Functional strength, focusing on the prime movers that you use in swimming, cycling, running. Now, what about, so let's say you're training Ironman, just sort of moderately competitive folks. I know coaches are mixed on this. Do you have them train for 20-mile runs? Or no? I know some coaches say, well, I don't bother with the 20-mile runs for my athletes if they're training for an Ironman because they're doing so much aerobic work. But I have talked to some coaches who say, oh, I always make sure they do a 20 plus or a 22 before the event.
It really depends on the athlete.
Yeah.
Again, like if you're older and or heavier, you just may not be able to manage doing those really long runs. You're going to have to do some long running, whether long is going to be relative to your fitness and your experience. Some people, 15, 16 miles is a long run. Other people, they can manage 20 or 21 or maybe even 22 prior to the race.
Yeah. Interesting.
I try to help the athletes build that overall endurance by doing some over distance work on the bike.
Yeah.
It gets your body used to moving for long periods of time, and it's much lower stress, much quicker recovery than if you try to build that with really long runs.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing 4-hour bikes, 5-hour bikes, that builds aerobic work. So yeah, I understand that. Now, what about swimming? You started off as a swimmer. Do you, most of the time triathletes, swimming is the limiter. Oftentimes it's the limiter. Do you try to make up for that in the pool, or do you, just take a sort of limiting approach to it?
It depends on the athlete. If all you want to do is just get through the swim, I don't emphasize that workout a whole lot. However, if somebody is actually trying to kind of be a little bit more competitive in their age group, and I only coach age group athletes, by the way, one of the best ways to have a great triathlon is to actually be able to get out of the water and feel fresh and not feel like, whoo, I barely made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and to be able to do that, you have to swim. You have to do swim workouts where the total workout distance is longer than what you're going to encounter in the race. So, like, for example, when I was getting ready for Kona, it's whatever, just under 4,000 yard swim. I would do a bunch of workouts that were 5,000, 6,000 yards, so that my body got used to doing longer swimming than I was actually going to encounter in the race. So when I got out of the water, it's like, done already? Awesome.
Right.
We're right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, it's, as a coach, I have to sort of get with the athlete and go, what's your purpose here? What's your priority? And let me make the workouts be in line with that. Like if somebody's just wants to get through the swim, they don't have a lot of time, they're busy, they've got a job, they've got their family. You can get through the swim with pretty short workouts. Yeah. But again, if you're trying to really get the best out of yourself, and especially in the longer races, it's good to actually do some over distance swim workouts so that you come out of the water fresh. And the same with the bike, you do some bike rides that are hopefully longer than what you're going to have in the race, so that when you get off the bike, it's not like you're at your limit, but your body kind of goes, really? All right, let's go run now.
Right. Well, we got to talk about nutrition, because you mentioned nutrition, and age group athletes come to you. They say, okay, I want to show up on race day with the right nutrition, or show up on the race day with the right body composition. What do you recommend throughout the entire training cycle, the whole macro cycle? Let's say somebody has 10 months to Ironman, or even a year to an Ironman. What do you recommend as a general protocol for daily nutrition? But also, I'm curious, what's your some recommendations you can give in that sort of 3-day period right before the Ironman event?
Yeah, well, let's see. On a day-to-day basis, obviously, the more healthy you eat, the more sort of well-rounded diet you have, the less junk that you put in yourself, the better your engine's going to perform. One of my absolute keys in nutrition is to look at what you're taking in, and if there are empty calories, cut that out, whatever it is. Try to eat high nutrient density foods.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're eating junk food, there's no nutrition in it. Yeah, you get calories, but there's no nutrients. And so that's one of the absolute key things, is to try to get high nutrient density foods. So, and high quality stuff. So one of the macro nutrients that every triathlete needs is a lot of protein. You're breaking the muscle down, and without protein, you won't rebuild.
Right.
If you eat animal products, that's no problem. If you are vegetarian or vegan, that can be more of a challenge, because your percentage of carbohydrates has gone way up compared to the protein that you're able to extract from the food. If you are an older athlete, older athletes need to eat a higher percentage of their total calories from protein to actually stimulate their body to regenerate the muscle that gets broken down during training. So young people, they eat a little bit of protein, their body goes, okay, let me use this and regenerate, replenish, rebuild the muscle. Older folks need to have more protein percentage in their diet for the body to go, oh, I have protein, I can rebuild the muscle. So that's kind of one key. I try to have what your meals have, definitely try to cut back or cut out added sugar.
Right.
If you have something that has sugar in it when you're actually training, you're going to utilize it for fuel about as quickly as you can absorb it. So it generally doesn't have much effect on your blood sugar. If you have a lot of sugar in your actual food diet afterwards, you can get insulin spikes. It shuts down your fat burning. So that engine that you're trying to activate for endurance is getting shut down, because if your blood sugar goes up, insulin's released, it shuts off fat burning and it stores the sugar as fat. So, I avoided sugar when I was competing. I still do. I basically, if it's somebody's birthday, I'll have a piece of cake,
Right.
I'm no angel. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But in general, every meal I look at it and go, okay, where's the protein? Second thing is, I ask myself, where are the good oils? Olive oil,
yeah.
avocado,
Yeah.
nuts. Every meal I have has a good source of good oils in it. And then also I go, where's all the phytonutrients, like stuff in kale, or real berries, or anything with a lot of color in it, the vegetables with a lot of color. And the final thing is, if you eat foods that have added flavorings to it, like you open up that bag of like Dorito Ranch style chips, that has a high flavor added to it, and that's sort of like food crack. It's like
Right. Right.
it hits that addictive part of the brain, and it makes
Food
you
reward.
it wants you to continually eat more of it. And what it's doing is it's masking your ability to actually listen to your body's natural intuitive sense that will tell you what you should be eating. So even food flavoring additives that are natural, they're enhancing the flavor of food to a point where it has an addictive aspect to it. And so cut out the garbage that has that added food flavoring to it. That's not saying cut out spices. Spices are okay. But if it says modified food flavoring or any kind of added food flavoring, keep it out.
That was always my nemesis, and of course, my occasional red wine.
Oh yeah, that's
And
all. That's a personal choice. You're going to have your red wine. I love having a glass, or two glasses or whatever.
Yeah.
Just so and you can make your own decision. Alcohol sort of competes with the same process, some of the same stuff that enables your body to rebuild muscle.
Yeah.
So if you've had a really hard workout, like a long run or a really hard strength workout or a really long bike ride or whatever, that might not be the best night to
right. And it's sort of empty calories and obviously no real nutritional value. Okay. And then what about that 3-day window right before the Ironman? How do you recommend that for your athletes?
Basically, when you're in those last few days, you're not training much. So I just continue to try to basically eat the same as normal. I will cut back on foods that are high fiber. One of the reasons is that if you're still eating high fiber all the way through race morning, that fiber in the gut slows the absorption of the calories that you're going to be taking in during the race,
right?
Which can then cause stomach backup and nauseousness. And I've had a lot of athletes who just can't keep nutrition down during a race, who eat super healthy, cut out all the fiber in those last couple of days, and all of a sudden they can manage their race nutrition. So that's kind of one thing. Obviously, you're going to want to hydrate. Obviously, if it's a hot race, you're going to want to try to have foods where you just add some salt to it, because you can store up salt just like you can carbohydrates. You don't have to carbo load. If you're cutting back on your training, but you're kind of eating basically the same blend of stuff that you normally do, your body's going to store up glycogen. And total bottom line is, if you're doing an Ironman, you're going to burn through that glycogen, and you need to get it from your race nutrition anyway. So whether you've stored up 1,500 calories or 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrate, it's not even a factor, because you're going to have to keep replacing it during the race anyway.
So no big carb load on that night before or whatever.
You can shift a little bit toward carb, but you don't want to overdo it, because then you can actually it can actually slow down that fat metabolism, which you want to have activated for race day.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
On that day, or so you go, you sleep, you get up, race morning. Any special thing race morning? Do you try to replace glycogen then, or do you just stop and throw in a gel before you? How do you recommend the race day?
Well, a couple things. First, ask yourself, if I was going to be going out for a really, really long training day, how many calories would I take in? What would I be eating?
Yeah.
You're not going to go ride 6 hours on a glass of Gatorade.
Yeah. Right.
You're going to have a breakfast, right?
Yeah.
But you also don't want to have a lot of bulk in your digestive tract. So kind of figure out how many calories are you going to want to take in race morning, and then figure out, can you get most of that through liquid, and have it be something that maybe you aren't going to be taking in the race. So I would have Ensure. I'd have a can or two for breakfast, a different flavor than I would have in the race. And then I'd have also like a piece of toast with some butter and avocado on it, just to kind of have a little different flavor going on. And then when you actually go to the race start, I really recommend that you have extra bottle of water, extra bottle of sport drink, and then, a gel or two, or some kind of sport energy bar or something, so that in that time between breakfast and your race start, you can top off the tank. Right. And especially now with wave starts, if you've got to get your bike in the rack by 6:30 or 7, but you're not starting until 9 or something, that's 3 hours, and you're going to be you're going to be ready for lunch.
Yeah. Exactly.
So make sure you have that stuff to keep topping off your sort of energy tank as you get ready for the swim.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about the 300 to 500 calories an hour some guys are taking. How do you figure that out with someone? Are you just doing field tests to try to figure out figure that out, how many calories they burn per hour, and then try to back into a number?
Yeah, kind of start with 300, 350 calories an hour as a starting point to test. Practice in your long rides. Track how many calories you're taking in per hour so that when you're done with that long ride, you actually are still fueled up and you could go for a run. And do it a number of times, because each day that you do it, your body's going to be in a little different kind of state. Like some days you're going to feel like you're taking in calories constantly, and other long rides maybe not quite as much. So anyway, start with that and see how many you need. Some people 350 is way too much, especially if you're a smaller, lighter person.
Yeah.
If you're bigger and heavier, 350 might leave you empty by the end of the ride. It might be bonky. You might need 450 calories an hour.
Yeah.
And
that was always mine. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I tried to get in 450, but it usually ended up being closer to 350. And then in the race, make sure that whatever you're using is something that you've tried. So if you're not taking your own nutrition, you find out what's going to be on the race course and practice with it. And my number one thing is it has to taste really good and work really well in training, because in the race it might taste okay.
All right.
If you're having to force it down in training, when you get to the race, you're not going to be able to stomach it.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I remember trying something like, gummy bears or M&Ms. Somebody will have them on a course and I'll grab them and keep going. I love those things any other time, but on the course, I just can't get them down. So, yeah, you're right. 100% with that. That's funny.
Yeah. And then the other thing to sort of remember is, when you are, let's say, practicing and trying to experiment and see how many calories an hour you're going to need, take those calories in at race pace. Let's say we go on long rides and, okay, I'm going to practice and see how many calories an hour I need. What a lot of athletes, including me, would do is I'd have all these calories with me and I'd be riding along, and then we'd stop to get water. And then I'd drink down, a whole bottle of whatever. Right. Well, while I'm sitting there filling one water bottle, drinking another one, my heart rate's 70. But in the race, when I'm drinking and eating, my heart rate's going to be 150. So practice taking in what you're going to take in while you're moving, while your heart rate's up, because that's going to be a very different experience than when you're stopped at a gas station or a convenience store.
Right. Yeah. And that's hard to do. I think if you have a sort of C race, you can practice there, but it's hard to do it when you're going out on any given weekend just with your buddies or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So great stuff. The time has just melted. So I want to get your thoughts. So you mentioned, you have Mark Allen coaching, mm-hmm. and then you mentioned you're also doing some coaching with TriDot. So I want you to talk about that. Just how do athletes benefit from your coaching endeavors, whether it be Mark Allen coaching or TriDot? How do they get involved? And I also want to get your thoughts about just coaching in the future. And now we have the march of AI. How's that going to affect the coaching business, or even your coaching business and coaching endeavors?
Yeah. Well, I moved all of my coaching and my clients over to TriDot about a year ago. And the reason is that they have some AI within the training programs that do stuff that I knew that I wanted to incorporate into my coaching, but I knew that there was no way I had the bandwidth or the knowledge or the programming team to be able to do it. And so, for example, all the training that you get in TriDot, it integrates, your age, your gender, your past history, where you are training, the temperature on the day, so like if you're training in Boston and it's the middle of winter, your training zones are going to be very different than when you're training in summer and it's baking and humid and hot.
Right.
And so it automatic your training zones are automatically adjusted for all of that kind of stuff. And the data that has gone into almost 20 years of development for TriDot is it's mind-boggling, the number of the thousands and thousands and thousands of workouts that have been analyzed and then sort of refined and put into what actually works. So like I might think A, B, and C works, but through their AI and what they've been able to analyze, they're going, yeah, A, B, and C works, but only if D and E are also working,
Right.
And so it basically what the tools within TriDot have done for me as a coach is it's kind of like, in the old days, a doctor would come to you with a little leather bag and he'd pull out the stethoscope and he'd stick it on your chest and you go, okay, cough,
Right.
and he'd try to figure out what's going on with you and he'd put the thermometer in and see what your temperature is. Well, nowadays, they put you into an MRI machine and they actually can look inside and get all
Right.
this analysis, and then it helps the doctor to actually fine tune and understand what's truly going on. That's kind of how AI is, and it's also with all of the data that athletes can generate in a training session now with power and your pace and how does that measure up as far as like actual stress on your body and all of these different things, they get analyzed through the AI that's in TriDot, and your future training gets adjusted based on that, and the predicted times that you can do in your race get adjusted based on that. And it's as refined as down to the point where like some platforms give you a stress score, and I won't mention any names, but
I know who you're talking about.
yeah, the first and probably most popular at this point gives you a stress score, but all it does is it analyzes the amount of time that you spent in, let's say, zone 4 and the amount of time that you spent in, let's say, zone 2. TriDot looks at that, but it also looks at where in the workout you did that. So for example, if you have, let's say, 10 minutes of zone 4 work and you do it at the very beginning of the workout, that's a heck of a lot easier and lower stress on you than if you do that zone 4 at the very
Right.
back end of the workout when you're tired. It's so much harder and it's much higher stress. And so that's like even down to like the stress score that you get in TriDot. It measures where in the workout you did the hard stuff, and
Right.
your stress score will change. And so it's so refined, but at the same time, you still need a coach. You still need that person that you can communicate with, that you can talk to, that you can have accountability with, and they can help you with a lot of the mental stuff. And then also, no matter how perfect kind of the AI is, there still are going to be times when things need to get factored in that the AI won't even see. Like, you've got a project at work and you're getting 3 hours of sleep, that kind of stuff. And or you've got a vacation coming up. How do you modify your training? Or an injury, or you're just feeling a little sick, or whatever it is. So anyway, for me, it's the ultimate blend of technology and the human art of human coaching.
Right.
I think it's where every type of coaching will eventually go, and TriDot actually has like a huge head start on anybody who's even trying to do this. I've looked at some other programs that supposedly have AI in the coaching, and it's so rudimentary compared to what we have.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can check it out, TriDot. You can go on and try training plans. And if it's a Mark Allen edition training plan, you get a lot of like daily video tips and tools and mindset stuff that comes with each one of the workouts. Mark Allen Premium, you get me as your coach who will look at your stuff basically every day, and you can comment, you can ask me questions. I comment on what I see. It's a super great sort of symbiosis between the athlete and me as their coach.
And that's on the spectrum from recreational to competitive. The people trying to qualify for Kona, all across the spectrum, can take you up on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I want the links. I want to put the links to it in the in the show notes. I think this is very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of talk now about AI, and I just looking at Chat GPT when it started to get popular, just saying, could this really replace a coach? And just playing around with it, I typed in create a high performance swim workout, and then it came back with something pretty impressive. That a coach would actually develop. So I think AI, if there's no coaches looking at this, they're behind. I think, the tools are getting better. The algorithms are getting better. The machine learning is getting better.
Well, and also, with the AI, it digests all of that daily data that comes in and sort of modifies training zones and future stuff based on what you're seeing. And as a coach, I could do that, but for like 5 people, or 3 people, because the volume of data that you'd have to look at and kind of figure out, what does this mean and how should this affect what we're doing in the future? And then tomorrow's going to be a super hot day. So how much should I have them slow down compared to it just takes all of that guesswork out of it, and it takes that huge mind crunch that it would take to manage the athlete. So the AI helps me as a coach to just make sure that the person is on track and on the right trajectory each and every single day. And then on top of that, then I get to actually look, and then it's super easy for me to go, oh yeah, no, we need to cut back here, we need to expand there, or the actual coaching stuff. Super cool.
Yeah. All right. I'll put the links to in the show notes, so check it out. And yeah, you can have the legend Mark Allen as your personal coach. You should also come up with some stuff for coaches too, because I would jump on that. I don't know if you still do anything with coaches, but
stay tuned. Something might be in the works on that.
Excellent. I'll be the first one on board. All right. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks so much, Mark, for being a guest. And for all the listeners, please go out and check out the links in the show notes. Thanks again, Mark.
All right, Tony, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Thanks again to Mark Allen. What a way to start off season 6. Go check out his book, The Art of Competition, link in the show notes. 1989thestory.com, that link's in the show notes. And of course, you can go check out all of his coaching resources in the show notes as well. I started out in endurance sports almost exactly 20 years ago. And I remember picking up the magazines and reading about the epic duels of the legends, Mark Allen versus David Scott, Julie Moss, Paula Newby Frazier. And I just, talking with Mark Allen, which was just incredible that after all these years, here I am sitting in front of him talking about endurance sports. It absolutely, I can say I've come full circle. It's a great honor to be able to sit down and have that conversation. And even though my tiny little accolades seem minuscule compared to the greatest endurance athlete of all time, it's great to just sit down as a coach to coach, and talk about these topics, and the time just melts away. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and I think quite a number of endurance enthusiasts, male, female, young, old, athlete, coaches, you're going to find this one useful. So thanks again, and this is the Endurance Experience.
Follow Event Horizon Endurance Sport on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for training programs and services. To become a member of our Endurance Institute or for a complete archive of podcasts, log on to our website, eventhorizon.tv.